The pen felt cold in my hand. I stared at the divorce papers spread across the mahogany table, and all I could think was, this is it. This is the moment my marriage officially dies. Luke sat across from me, his jaw tight, his eyes anywhere but on mine. And next to him, right next to him, was Sophie, his mistress, his fiancée, the woman he'd chosen over 7 years of marriage. She looked radiant. That's what killed me most. Her skin glowed, her designer dress fit perfectly, and her diamond engagement ring caught the light every time she moved her hand. She looked like a woman who'd won. And I looked like, well, I looked like exactly what they thought I was. Quiet. Defeated. Forgettable. Can we hurry this up? Sophie said, glancing at her watch. We have a meeting with the wedding planner at 3. My hand tightened around the pen. Luke shifted uncomfortably. Sophie, come on. What? It's true. We've already spent 2 hours on this. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw pity in her eyes. Pity mixed with something else. Contempt, maybe. Look, I know this is hard for you. But you'll move on. Find someone more suited to your lifestyle. My lifestyle. As if I had one. As if I were anything more than the woman Luke had outgrown. Sign it, Luke said quietly. Not cruel. Just tired. Like I was a task he needed to complete. Let's just get this over with. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I'd practiced this in my head 100 times. I signed my name on every page they'd marked with little yellow tabs. Grace Parker. Grace Parker. Grace Parker. Soon, I'd just be Grace Morgan again. Back to my maiden name. Back to being nobody. Except they didn't know what I'd done 2 days ago. They didn't know that while they were tasting wedding cakes and picking out floral arrangements, I'd been sitting in a lawyer's office signing very different papers. Papers that made me the majority shareholder of Feedtray Group. Sophie's company. Her empire. Her entire identity. I'd bought it all. And they had no idea. I slid the divorce papers across the table. Done. Luke exhaled, relieved. Sophie actually smiled at me, one of those patronizing smiles that said, poor thing, at least she's being reasonable about this. I hope you find happiness, Grace, she said, standing up. Really, I do. You deserve someone who appreciates, simplicity. Simplicity. I stood too, gathering my purse, and I looked at her, really looked at her, and I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not a broken one. A smile that held a secret she couldn't even begin to imagine. Thank you, Sophie, I said softly. I hope you enjoy your wedding. I'm sure it'll be memorable. They left first, Luke's hand on Sophie's lower back, already moving forward into their new life together. I stayed behind in that conference room for just a moment, alone with the ghost of my marriage and the weight of what I'd set in motion. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single text to my attorney. It's time. Schedule the board meeting. I walked out of that room a divorced woman. But I walked out with more power than Luke or Sophie could ever comprehend. And they would find out soon enough. Let me tell you how I got here. 6 months ago, I found out about the affair. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on his collar, no suspicious texts left open on his phone. It was smaller than that. Quieter. The kind of betrayal that creeps up on you until one day you realize your husband hasn't really looked at you in months. He started working late. Every night. Weekend trips for client meetings. Phone calls he'd take in the other room. And when he was home, he was absent. Present but not there, Then one night, I decided to surprise him at his office. I should have known better. When the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, the first thing I saw was Sophie. She was leaning against Luke's office door, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than our mortgage payment, laughing at something he'd said. And then he kissed her. Not a quick kiss. Not an accident. The kiss that said I love you. I choose you. I want you. I stood there, frozen, watching my husband kiss another woman in the hallway of his office building like they were the only 2 people in the world. I took the elevator back down. I didn't confront him. Not then. because some part of me, some stupid, hopeful part, still believed it might be a mistake, a moment of weakness, something we could fix. But when I got home and really looked at our life together, I saw the truth. Our wedding photos gathered dust on the mantle. He'd stopped asking about my day months ago. We hadn't had a real conversation in God, I couldn't even remember. I'd become invisible in my own marriage. That night, I cried myself to sleep on the couch. And when I woke up, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't going to beg him to love me. I wasn't going to fight for a man who'd already chosen someone else. But I also wasn't going to let him destroy me. 2 weeks after discovering the affair, my aunt passed away. Aunt Margaret had never married, never had children. She'd spent her life building a successful career in finance, investing wisely, living on her own terms. And when she died, she left everything to me. $3 million. The lawyer read the will in his office, and I remember sitting there, numb, as he explained the terms. No strings attached. No conditions. Just a letter that said, "Grace, darling, use this to become who you're meant to be. Don't let anyone, especially not a man, make you small. I love you. Be brave." I read that letter 5 times in the parking lot of the law office, tears streaming down my face. Aunt Margaret had known. Somehow, she'd known I would need this. That inheritance became my weapon, my lifeline, my chance to take back control of a life that had been slipping away from me. But I didn't tell Luke. When he came home that night, late again, smelling like Sophie's perfume, I just said, "My aunt died. The funeral is next week." "Oh," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "I'm sorry. Do you need me to come?" "No," I said. "I'll be fine on my own." He nodded, already distracted by another text message. Probably from her. And that's when I knew he didn't deserve the truth. He didn't deserve to know about the inheritance, about my plans, about anything. He'd made his choice. Now I would make mine. I spent 3 months researching Feedtray Group. Sophie's company was impressive, I had to admit. She'd built it from the ground up, a food delivery and catering empire that serviced corporate events, weddings, and high-end private parties. The kind of business that looked glamorous but ran on razor-thin margins and depended entirely on reputation. I learned everything about it. Financial statements, client lists, board composition. I even discovered that Sophie had been leveraging the company's credit to fund her increasingly extravagant lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, that penthouse apartment she loved to post about on Instagram. All charged to company accounts, disguised as business expenses. She was bleeding the company dry, and the board had no idea. But I did. I hired the best corporate attorneys money could buy, not the flashy ones, but the quiet, ruthless ones who specialized in hostile acquisitions and anonymous transactions. I structured the deal through 3 shell companies, each one carefully designed to hide my involvement. On paper, a prime brokerage firm based in Delaware was purchasing a controlling interest in Feedtray Group. In reality, that firm was mine. Every share, every vote, every ounce of power. The deal closed 3 days before the divorce papers were signed. I'll never forget that moment, sitting in my attorney's office, signing the final documents that made me the majority shareholder of Sophie's empire. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Focused, like a storm that had finally found its direction. "Are you sure about this?" my attorney asked. "Once this is public, there's no going back. They'll know it was you." "I'm sure," I said. "And you understand that you're not just buying a company. You're buying a fight." I looked him directly in the eye. "But I've been avoiding fights for too long." He smiled. The kind of smile that said he'd seen this before, women taking back power from the men who'd underestimated them. "Then let's make sure you win." The hardest part was waiting. I had to sign those divorce papers knowing what I knew. Had to sit across from Sophie while she bragged about her business success, about the expansion plans she had for Feedtray Group, about how Luke's firm was helping her secure investor funding. She talked about my company like it were still hers. And I just smiled and nodded and let her believe it. "You know, Grace," she said at one point during the signing, her voice dripping with false kindness, "maybe you should think about starting your own business. Something small. A bakery, maybe? You always seemed like the domestic type." The domestic type. Luke shifted uncomfortably. "Sophie." "What?" "I'm trying to help." She touched his arm, that proprietary gesture that said he's mine now. Grace needs something to focus on after the divorce. Something to give her life purpose. I looked at her for a long moment. Studied her perfect makeup, her designer outfit, her complete confidence that she'd won. "You're right," I said finally. "I do need purpose. I've actually been thinking about that a lot lately." "See?" Sophie beamed. "That's the spirit. You'll figure it out. Maybe take some classes or something. Find yourself." Find myself. If only she knew I'd already found exactly what I was looking for. Her entire empire, signed and sealed, and ready to be claimed. I checked my watch. I should go. I have a meeting in an hour. "Oh." Luke looked surprised. "What kind of meeting?" "Board meeting," I said casually, gathering my things. "For a company I recently invested in." "Really?" Sophie laughed. "That's great. See, you're already moving forward. What company?" I paused at the door, looked back at both of them, and smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." The board meeting was scheduled for 2 days after the divorce was finalized. I arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit I'd bought specifically for this moment. Not flashy. Not aggressive. Just powerful. The kind of outfit that said I belong here, and you're about to find out why. The Feedtrade Group boardroom was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive oak table, leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. Sophie's taste. Sophie's choices. Soon to be my decisions. The board members filed in, confused about why they'd been called to an emergency meeting. Sophie arrived last, because of course she did, making an entrance in head-to-toe designer wear. She stopped dead when she saw me. "Grace? What are you doing here?" "Sitting in my chair," I said calmly. "What?" "This is a private board meeting. You need to leave." "Actually," said my attorney, standing from his seat at the far end of the table, "Mrs. Parker, or should I say Ms. Morgan, has every right to be here. As do I, representing the controlling shareholder of Feedtrade Group." Sophie's face went pale. "Controlling shareholder? What are you talking about?" "I'm the majority owner." "Were," I corrected softly. "You were the majority owner. 3 days ago, your shares were acquired through a transaction you approved yourself, believing the buyer was a prime brokerage firm interested in expansion capital." That was... She looked around the table, panicking. "That was a standard investment deal. They purchased 30%. 48%, my attorney corrected. Combined with the shares we purchased from 3 other minority investors who were, shall we say, concerned about recent financial irregularities, Ms. Morgan now controls 51% of Feedtrade Group." The room erupted. "This is insane. How is this legal? Sophie, did you know about this?" Sophie was staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You did this?" "Yes," I said simply. "I did." But why? You don't know anything about running a business. You're just what?" I leaned forward. "Just the quiet wife? The domestic type? The woman with no ambition?" Her mouth opened and closed. "Funny thing about being underestimated, Sophie. People tell you all kinds of things when they think you're not paying attention. They show you their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their illegal financial activities." I nodded to my attorney, who distributed folders to each board member. "What you're looking at is a comprehensive audit of Feedtrade Group's finances over the past 18 months. You'll notice several discrepancies. Personal luxury purchases charged to company accounts. Falsified expense reports. Unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts. Sophie shot to her feet. This is a witch hunt. You're just angry about Luke. This has nothing to do with Luke, I said, and I meant it. This is about fiduciary responsibility, about protecting shareholder investments, about ensuring this company operates with integrity. I stood then, walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of her. You called me simple, Sophie. You said I deserved simplicity. But you know what's actually simple? Stealing from your own company because you think no one's watching. That's simple. Stupid, but simple. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Morgan, what exactly are you proposing? I turned to face the board. Effective immediately, I'm assuming the position of chairperson. Sophie will be removed as CEO and reassigned to a consultant role pending a full investigation into these financial irregularities. I'll be bringing in my own executive team to restructure operations and restore this company to profitability, legal profitability. You can't do this, Sophie whispered. I already have. The vote was unanimous. As Sophie was escorted from the boardroom, she turned back one last time. Luke will hear about this. He'll. Tell Luke I said hello, I interrupted, and remind him that his firm manages your accounts. You might want to mention that federal investigators will be reviewing all of your financial transactions, including the ones his company facilitated. I watched her face drain of all color as the implications sank in. Then I sat down in the chairman's seat and picked up my agenda for the meeting. Now then, I said to the remaining board members, let's talk about the future of this company. Luke showed up at my apartment 3 days later. I'd been expecting him, honestly. Had already prepared what I would say, how I would react. But when I opened the door and saw him standing there, his hair a mess, his tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face, something in me wavered. Just for a second. Then I remembered Sophie's hand on his arm. Her laugh. That kiss in his office hallway. And the moment passed. Can I come in? No. He blinked. Grace, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. We're divorced. You're engaged. Congratulations. Don't. He ran his hand through his hair. Don't do that. Don't act like you don't know what's happening. Sophie told me everything. The acquisition. The board meeting. The investigation. Then you know more than I thought you would. Sophie never struck me as someone who shared information freely. Why are you doing this? I laughed. Actually laughed. You're seriously asking me that? You cheated on me, look. You made me feel worthless for months. You divorced me so you could marry your mistress. And now you want to know why I bought her company. This isn't about us. It's about exactly us. My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. You and Sophie spent months making me feel small, unambitious, simple. You built your entire relationship on the foundation of how much better she was than me, how much more successful, how much more everything. I never said. You didn't have to say it. I felt it every single day. He looked down. I'm sorry. For what? For the affair? For the divorce? For underestimating me? Which part are you sorry for, Luke? All of it. His voice cracked. I'm sorry for all of it. I was an idiot. I threw away 7 years for what? For someone who's now under federal investigation. My firm is involved, Grace. Do you understand what that means? Perfectly. If Sophie goes down, I could lose everything. My reputation. My license. The firm could be implicated in financial fraud. I studied him for a long moment. And you want me to, what? Make it go away. I want you to call off the dogs. Stop the investigation. Sophie made mistakes, yeah, but she doesn't deserve to go to prison. Doesn't she? Grace, please. And there it was. The moment I'd been both dreading and craving. Luke Parker, the man who'd tossed me aside like yesterday's newspaper, was begging me for mercy. Do you know what I did with my aunt's inheritance? I asked quietly. He looked confused by the change of subject. What? My Aunt Margaret died 6 months ago. Left me $3 million. You never even asked about it. Never wondered if I was okay, if I needed anything, if the funeral was difficult. I didn't know it was that much. No, you didn't. Because you stopped paying attention to me long before you started sleeping with Sophie. I leaned against the doorframe. I used that money to buy Feed Tray Group. Every penny of it. My entire inheritance went into taking control of Sophie's empire. Why? Because I could. Because I was tired of being invisible. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt, Luke, it transforms. And I decided I'd rather transform into someone powerful than someone bitter. I started to close the door, then paused. The investigation will continue. Sophie will face consequences for her actions. That's not revenge, Luke. That's justice. Learn the difference. Wait, he put his hand on the door. What happens to us? Us? I smiled sadly. There is no us. There hasn't been a us for a long time. You just didn't notice until it was too late. I closed the door. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt the weight of it. Not regret. Not satisfaction. Just emptiness. Revenge was supposed to feel better than this. I want to tell you that destroying Sophie's empire felt good. I want to tell you that watching Luke's firm scramble to distance themselves from the scandal filled me with satisfaction. But the truth is, it didn't. Over the next 3 months, I executed every strategic move with precision. I canceled Feed Tray Group's contract with Luke's investment firm. I halted the magazine feature about Sophie's inspiring rise to success. I even, and I'm not proud of this, manipulated their wedding venue into double booking their date. Every move was legal. Every action is defensible. Every strike calculated. But none of it made me feel whole. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in my empty apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the satisfaction would kick in, when I'd feel like I'd won. Instead, I just felt tired. My best friend, Maria, came over one night and found me surrounded by financial reports, drinking wine alone in the dark. Grace, what are you doing? Working. This isn't working. This is... She looked around at the papers, the laptop screens, the evidence of my obsession. This is drowning. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're destroying yourself trying to destroy them. They deserve it. Maybe. But do you deserve this? She sat down next to me. Look at yourself. You've lost weight. You never sleep. You've turned down 3 dinner invitations, 2 gallery openings, and that guy from your yoga class who's been trying to ask you out for weeks. I don't have time for what? For life? For being happy? She grabbed my hand. Grace, honey, you won. You bought Sophie's company. You exposed her fraud. You protected yourself financially. You proved everyone who underestimated you wrong. But now you're trapped in this cycle of revenge, and it's eating you alive. I pulled my hand away. You don't understand. Then help me understand. What's the endgame here? When does it stop? When is Sophie in prison? When Luke loses everything? When you've burned down every bridge to your past? When it feels like enough? And when will that be? I didn't have an answer. Maria left shortly after, but her words stayed with me. When does it stop? That night, I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Sharp cheekbones from stress. Dark circles from sleepless nights. Eyes that held more anger than I'd ever intended to carry. I'd become the thing I swore I wouldn't. Not bitter, exactly, but consumed. Revenge had given me purpose, but it had also taken something from me. The ability to imagine a future that wasn't defined by Luke and Sophie's past. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. I want to sell Feed Tray Group back to Sophie, I said. What? Grace, we've spent months. I know, but I'm done. Structure a deal. Fair market value, minus significant deductions for her fraud. Make her sign an agreement acknowledging the illegal activities. But give her back her company. This doesn't make sense from a business perspective. I don't care. I'm not a business person, remember? I'm just the domestic type. He laughed despite himself. All right, if you're sure. I am. Because revenge wasn't going to heal me. And winning wasn't going to make me whole. The only thing that would do that was deciding to be someone else entirely. Someone stronger than the woman Luke betrayed. And someone better than the woman who tried to destroy him for it. 5 years is a long time. Long enough to build something real. Something meaningful. Something that has nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with purpose. The Forbes Foundation launched 3 years after my divorce. It's a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting women going through divorce, providing legal resources, financial planning, career counseling, and most importantly, a community of people who understand what it feels like to rebuild your life from the ground up. We've helped over 2,000 women so far. Every time I meet with someone new, someone sitting in my office with red-rimmed eyes and divorce papers clutched in shaking hands, I see myself. That woman who signed her life away across a mahogany table. That woman who thought she was nothing without her husband's approval. And I get to tell her, you're wrong. You're everything. You just can't see it yet. The foundation is funded partially by the profit I made from selling Feed Tray Group back to Sophie. She paid $3 million for her company, exactly what I'd spent to acquire it. Not a penny more. The rest of the value I'd built during my year as chairperson? I donated it all. People thought I was crazy. You could have walked away with tens of millions, my attorney said. I walked away with something better, I told him. My peace. Sophie runs Feed Tray Group honestly now. We don't talk often, but when we do, there's a mutual respect that didn't exist before. She knows I could have destroyed her. I know she was destroyed by her own choices, not by mine. And Luke? Luke sent flowers to my foundation's opening gala. Enclosed was a card that said, I'm proud of who you've become. I wish I'd seen it sooner. But I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Just indifference. He's part of a life I used to live. A chapter I've closed. And honestly, I barely think about him anymore. That's how I know I've healed. Not because I forgave him. I'm not sure I have entirely, but because he's become irrelevant to my happiness. I ran into Luke 6 months ago. It was completely random. I was leaving my therapist's office. Yes, I see a therapist now, and yes, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, and there he was. Standing outside the building, hesitating like he couldn't decide whether to go in. Grace. I stopped. Hi. He looked different. Older, obviously. But also, is smaller somehow. Less sure of himself. The swagger was gone, replaced by something quieter. Sadder. I didn't know you came here, he said. Every Wednesday for 3 years. Oh. He shuffled his feet. That's good. Therapy's good. I've been thinking about starting. You should. It helps. We stood there in awkward silence, 2 strangers who used to be everything to each other. I heard about the foundation, he said finally. What you're doing for women going through divorce. It's incredible, Grace. Really. Thank you. I've wanted to call you. To apologize properly. But I didn't know if. It's okay, I interrupted gently. I know. Do you? He looked at me, really looked at me. Because I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I'll ever understand how I could have been so stupid. So blind. You were right there, and I couldn't see you. You saw what you wanted to see. We both did. What does that mean? I chose my words carefully. I saw a man I thought could make me complete. You saw a woman you thought would never challenge you. We were both wrong. And maybe that's okay. Is it? It has to be. Because the past can't be changed, Luke. We can only decide what we do next. He nodded slowly. I wrote you letters, over the years. Never sent them. But I wrote them. What did they say? That I'm sorry. That you deserved better. That I hope you found happiness. He smiled sadly. That I wish I could have been the man you needed me to be. My throat tightened. I wish you could have been too. But you're okay now? You're happy? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. I'm at peace, I said finally. Which is better than happy. Happy comes and goes. Peace stays. I'm glad. He meant it. I could hear it in his voice. Really, Grace. I'm glad you found peace. Even if it meant what happened with Sophie and me. What did happen with you too? We got married. Lasted 8 months. Turned out we worked better as an affair than as actual partners. He laughed bitterly. Shocking, right? I didn't laugh. Didn't feel vindicated. Just sad for both of them. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Are you? He looked skeptical. Yeah, I am. Because I don't want you to hurt the way I hurt. I just wanted you to understand what you did. I do now. Too late, but I do. It's never too late to understand. It's just too late to change the past. He looked down at his shoes. Thank you for not destroying me. You could have. God knows I deserved it. I was going to, I admitted. For a while there, destroying you was all I thought about. But then I realized something. What? That true power isn't about revenge. It's about freeing yourself from the need for it. He nodded. You've changed. Grown. Become someone I don't even recognize. Good, I said softly. Because I don't want to be recognizable to the person who couldn't see me in the first place. I left him standing there on that sidewalk, and I didn't look back. Not out of anger. Out of grace. The same grace I'd finally learned to show myself. The Forbes Foundation held its annual gala last month. 500 people. 20 corporate sponsors. Media coverage from every major outlet in the city. And me, standing at the podium in a dress I'd chosen myself, not because a man told me it looked nice, but because I felt powerful in it, looking out at a room full of women whose lives had been changed by the work we do. 5 years ago, I said into the microphone, I sat in a conference room and signed divorce papers. I felt like my life was ending, like I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to get right. And in some ways I had failed, but not in the way I thought. The room was silent. I'd failed to see my own worth. I'd failed to recognize that I didn't need someone else's validation to be complete. I'd failed to understand that being alone doesn't mean being broken. It means being free to become who you're meant to be. I saw women wiping tears, nodding, understanding. The Forbes Foundation exists because I learned something important. We are not defined by who leaves us. We're defined by what we build after they're gone. And ladies, we can build anything. The applause was deafening. After my speech, I worked the room, talking to donors, thanking volunteers, hugging women I'd helped over the years. And that's when I met James Green. He was a venture capitalist, mid-40s, with kind eyes and a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. We talked about the foundation, about women's empowerment in business, about his sister who'd gone through a difficult divorce 3 years prior. She could have used something like this, he said. I watched her struggle and I felt so helpless. Is she doing better now? Much. She runs her own consulting firm, has full custody of her kids, lives on her own terms. He smiled. Kind of like you. Kind of, I agreed. We talked for another 20 minutes, and when he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime, just dinner, no pressure, no expectations, I surprised myself by saying yes. Because why not? I'd spent 5 years rebuilding myself, rediscovering my strength, learning to be happy alone. But maybe I didn't have to stay alone forever. Maybe being whole doesn't mean being solitary. Maybe it just means being ready. Later that night, after the gala ended and the ballroom was empty except for cleanup crews, I received a text from an unknown number. Hi, Grace. This is Rachel Harris. I'm Luke's niece. I heard about your foundation from my aunt, and I'm going through a divorce myself. Would you be willing to mentor me? I know it's a lot to ask considering the connection, but I don't know where else to turn. I stared at that text for a long time. Luke's niece. Family. A connection to a past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. My first instinct was to say no. To protect my peace. To keep that part of my life separate from this new one. But then I thought about what the foundation was really about. Helping women. All women. No matter their connections or their past or their last names. Coffee this week? I'd be happy to talk. Because that's what being at peace looks like. Not avoiding your past. Not letting it control you. Just acknowledging it exists and choosing to move forward anyway. So that's my story. Not a revenge story, though it started that way. Not a redemption story, though I guess that's part of it too. It's a survival story. A growth story. A story about what happens when the worst thing you can imagine forces you to become the best version of yourself. I learned a lot of lessons over the past 5 years. Self-worth isn't defined by others. Luke didn't make me worthless by leaving, and I didn't become worthy by succeeding after him. I was always enough. I just had to learn to see it. Peace is more powerful than revenge. I could have destroyed Luke and Sophie completely. Legally, financially, socially. But I would have destroyed myself in the process. Letting go wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I've ever done. Betrayal can redirect you toward your purpose. If Luke hadn't cheated, I might have spent the rest of my life being someone's quiet wife. Instead, I built something that matters. Something that helps people. Something I'm genuinely proud of. True freedom comes when revenge no longer matters. I knew I was healed when I stopped checking Luke's social media. When I stopped caring about Sophie's success or failure. When their story became background noise to my own. You're not defined by your past, you're defined by your future. Grace Carter signed those divorce papers. But the woman I became after? She's not defined by what was done to her. She's defined by what she built despite it. I'm 38 now. I run a successful foundation. I have friends who actually see me. I'm dating someone who asks about my day and actually listens to the answer. I go to therapy. I practice yoga. I've learned to cook, badly, but I'm trying. Most importantly, I like who I am. Not in a narcissistic way. Just, I'm comfortable in my skin. I don't apologize for taking up space. I don't shrink myself to make others comfortable. I speak up when something's wrong and I'm learning, slowly, to ask for help when I need it. That's the real victory. Not buying Sophie's company. Not exposing fraud. Not watching Luke's empire crumble. The victory is waking up every morning and recognizing the woman in the mirror. The victory is building a life that doesn't require anyone's approval but my own. The victory is knowing that even if everything fell apart tomorrow, the foundation, the relationship, all of it, I would still be okay. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all. I don't need to be rescued. I don't need to be validated. I don't need to be chosen. I just need to be me. And I'm more than enough. Revenge is a dish best served never. Peace is the only course worth tasting. If you're still reading this instead of commenting, you already know someone who needs this story. Drop a comment, even just one word, about what hit hardest for you. Then share it. Because somewhere out there is a woman signing divorce papers who thinks her life is over. She needs to know, it's only just beginning. Don't scroll past this. Say something.